Okay, good evening, everyone. For those of you that are now joining us, you're looking at a slideshow of upcoming programs, and I'm hoping that you can make it to some of these. Whoops.
Commentary around the Constitution, because this is precisely why there isn't a monuments bus. They couldn't be clearer. They were worried.
Let's see. I am going to ask everyone if you could turn off your mic, please. Let's see. I would appreciate it. Yeah. Okay. And so anyway, our first program coming up that I'm going to talk about is Harry and Bess Truman, a love story in partnership and letters. And, you know, for those of you that are joining us from outside the Kansas City area, Truman Library is a wonderful place to visit. And it was it's recently remodeled. It's just a very, very exciting place to visit. Okay, next week that's not next week, that's next month. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Organic gardening. If you've done programs with Mark Lyons, our master gardener, he's going to join us in June for organic gardening. Sorry, I got a message there. Let's see. Barcelona, Jewel of the Nile, that is coming up May 28th. And this is another program of Jean's. So they'll have, if you like tonight's program, be sure and sign up for Barcelona, Jewel of the Nile. And that QR code will take you to the registration page. Let's see. Garden to Table Dishes. This is let's see, Vanessa Young. If you've done some of our culinary programs online, Vanessa Young has does some really fun programs. So Garden to Table Dishes. It's getting to be that time of year. Let's see. Oh, and this is a program that's actually in person. So if you are one of our Kansas City area viewers, we have the Harvey Girls, Women's Roles in Railroads, Kansas and U.S. History, and that will be June 10th and 11th at our Woodneath Library Center and our Colburn Road Library Center. Let's see. This is another fun one. I was just telling Jean how much I like the Beatles. Rock and roll in the movies, Bill Haley to the Beatles. So this is another fun one. I think I've actually hosted a program on, was it Help? I think it was. No, it wasn't Help. It was A Hard Day's Night. We had a film historian come and did a program on A Hard Day's Night. It's been a long time since we did it. So anyway, that's coming up soon, and you can register for that program through the QR code. Let's see. And that one is tomorrow night. If you have seen Father Dominic, who is known as the Bread Monk, he had his own PBS program, and so he'll be presenting that program tomorrow at 7 o'clock. So Beyond Hot Cross Buns. Oh, that one was already over, so I need to go backwards. Sorry. Okay, Beyond Hot Cross Buns coming up. Let's see. Rock and Roll at the Movies, Bill Haley to the Beatles. And if you are just joining us, you're looking at a slideshow of upcoming programs, mostly virtual, but this one here is in person at our Woodneath Library Center and our Colburn Road Library Center. And that one will be coming up in June. Garden to Table Dishes. If you've done a virtual program with Vanessa Young, a lot of fun. I wish we could have samples for that one, but yeah, can't do that virtually. And this one, tonight's presenter, Jean Flynn, is going to do a program for us on Barcelona, Jewel of the Mediterranean. So if you like tonight's program, I'll put a link to that in the chat. And if you don't have time for the QR code, I'll put the link in the chat. Organic gardening coming up in June. I did just plant my first tomato in years this weekend. Whoops, went too fast. The squirrels get to them before I do, so I'm going to cross my fingers and hopefully I can have a few fresh tomatoes this year. And then the last slide I'm going to share with you tonight is about Harry and Bess Truman. Those of you who are in our area, I highly recommend. I'm not getting paid for this, but I highly recommend going to the Truman Library. It was just a wonderful visit and a wonderful remodel. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Let's see. Oh dear. Let's see. Okay. And let me get rid of that screen. All right. And so Jean, if you want to go ahead and get ready, let's see. We will be starting pretty soon. We have a lot of people joining us tonight, but we've promised a 6:30 start time, so we'll go ahead and get started pretty soon. Let's see. I need to get my cheat sheet out. Yeah, there we go. Okay, there we go. I am so looking forward to this. I was just talking to Jean before you all joined us that European travel is on my bucket list. Retirement is rapidly approaching. I do have a countdown calendar on my cell phone, so, but who's counting? Yeah. Okay, I have 6:30, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. And those of us that join late won't miss too much. I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Cheryl Pemberton. I'm with the Mid-Continent Public Library. I'm going to ask if you could keep your mic muted throughout the program. And if you have questions about the program, please put them in chat, and Jean will answer as many as possible as at the end of the program. And as always, I'll be putting a survey in the chat for you. We do value your feedback. So if you could fill out that survey. This program will be recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for just 2 weeks. Although I don't know exactly how soon it will be uploaded because it's not my department. And so it kind of depends on their workload. So as soon as it's available on YouTube, I'll send out an email, and I look forward to, or I hope you can look forward to viewing the program tonight, or tonight's program, if you'd like to look at it again. Okay, now that I've got my housekeeping announcements out of the way, I just want to take a moment to introduce you to our speaker tonight, Jean Flynn. Jean spent 35 years in sales and marketing positions at major technology firms. After retiring, he taught half-time for 7 years at Harper Community College. In addition to giving presentations at libraries and senior groups, he volunteers at the nonprofit Barrington Career Center and serves on the board of the Institute for Continued Learning at Roosevelt University. He holds an MA degree from NIU, I should have asked, and an MBA from the University of Chicago. He has been to Europe 17 times, which may have increased since I've gotten this bio, in the last 19 years, and loves to share his travel adventures. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Jean.
I'm delighted to be here, Cheryl, and thank you for the return invitation. So tonight, we're going to be talking about Britain and the British Isles. But we're going to be talking about beyond London primarily, and London. London is an amazing city. So I have a whole separate lecture on London, and it's so easy to get there and visit. They speak English, kind of English. With some of their words we won't understand. They call a sweater a jumper, but pretty much they understand us and we can understand them. So it really is an amazing place to visit. So, but I want to look beyond London as we explore the British Isles. And so we'll be talking a little bit, well, first of all, in London itself, the history, the arts, the entertainment, visiting the royals, people watching, it's all there. And sometimes the first time you go to London, you want to see the historical places, but if you ever go back, you can really just go there for fun and watch people and attend a couple of musicals. It's just wonderful on return visits as well. So, but when we look beyond London, and what I want to talk about tonight is kind of about, what we can see and understand about the English people, and what are the myths and realities as we think about England and Britain. And we also want to talk a little bit about BritX, how that's working out. When, Britain and the United Kingdom, they severed the relationship with the European Union. So so having open borders and having movement of things without tariffs, that's no longer part of their economy. So we'll talk about that at the end. So one of the things I wanted to explore is how the British see themselves. And one book I read last year, it talked about a self-image that says basically we are the Shire people. And if you saw the movie Lord of the Rings, or if you read the book about Frodo Baggins, in that book, we had the Shire people. These are peaceful people. They're not warmongers. They live quietly in their little villages. And when the need came for them to save humanity, Frodo Baggins, he really wanted to avoid that, but he finally rose to the occasion and he helped save humanity in the Lord of the Rings. And in the respect, that's part of the British ego and part of their image. They came to the rescue of the free world in World War II, and as the only standing between Adolf Hitler taking over all of Europe. It was their resistance to in the face of all the aggression and the superior air force that Germany had, and the rest of Europe had really crumbled. Britain stood there in defense of freedom. So part of their image. Now that certainly is part of their image, but there's another reality too for Great Britain, and that is that the British Empire, they ruled a huge part of the known world. If we go back, if we go back to 1750, they had Canada, they had the U.S., they had India, large sections of the world. Now, the U.S. we were able to avoid with our revolution. We were able to step aside, but the rest of the British Empire stayed part of the British Empire, into the 1920s and 1930s. But the British Empire, they were masters of industry, trade, war, and to most of the colonies, they felt Britain makes every decision in their own favor. Friends of mine from India say Britain took the iron ore from India, brought it up to England, turned it into products, and shipped it back and charged them much more than they charged in England for the same product. So everything was in the British favor. So that's not quite the same image of these peaceful little people living in a small village, but both were kind of a reality. Both were part of their self-image. So here we have Queen Victoria. She was queen of the British Empire. This is an image back from the 1870s. The royal splendor of Great Britain. Here we saw it at King Charles's coronation. Now they no longer have an empire to speak of, but playing the empire and playing royalty, it's certainly a wonderful, brings in a lot of money. So it's certainly part of the marketing of the United Kingdom. So the story that I'm telling tonight is based on a journey that Nancy and I took 2 years ago. And the journey started, it was with a company called Globus. We were on a bus visiting Wales and Scotland and large parts of Britain and England. But we started in London and we went to Stonehenge, Bath, Wales, Liverpool, all these locations across the British Isle. So here we are. This is our bus on the right. There's actually another bus from the same company, and they sometimes stayed at our hotel. Sometimes they were at a different hotel. But basically, on our bus, it was the 25 people that we associated with. They were the people that became our friends. It was a wonderful experience. So here we have. There is Tara, our tour guide on the left, and there's Steve, who is the bus driver. So they were the team leading us, and they did a wonderful job. If you were ever on a European tour, if you have a tour guide, a good tour guide, you know, by the first afternoon or the first evening, all the people on the trip, you really are working together and collaborating. And if somebody's there as a solo traveler, everybody invites them along for dinner. We all look after each other. It becomes almost like family in the course of this 8 or 9 days. So our first stop was at Stonehenge, and this was a prehistoric site where the inhabitants of this region in southwest England built this monument, which is believed for religious purposes. So it was used to signify the times of the year, and at certain periods like the winter equinox, like December 21st, the sun would shine specifically at one part of the rock. So they would use this almost as a calendar and almost as a religious purpose to show this is part of the cycle of the year, part of the cycle of life. And at the time, they would have had a whole ring of these massive stones, and it would all be completed. The ring, the horizontal stones would have surrounded the entire complex. So this all took place 5,000 years ago. And it's not clear how they did it, because they know, because of looking at the type of stone, they know this stone came from 150 miles away. So the question is, how did it get here? Some of the stones came from closer, some came from further away, depending on what kind of stone they needed. But this is a major engineering feat, and they don't know, did they use logs to roll these along? Did they wait for the winter and perhaps with the frozen ground? There's lots of speculation, but every theory, there's also counterpoints that would say it's not likely that it could happen that way. So here we have still a mystery. And here's what the stone might have looked like. And perhaps this is one theory where it was perhaps on a sled. So this is, at the place, they have a little village showing what the workers might have lived in and how they might have moved the rocks around. The day we were there, it was torrential rain. So we actually were only out looking at the stones for about 10 minutes between the high wind and high rain. So after we left the Stonehenge, we went to the town of Bath, which was a Roman spa town. So 2,000 years ago, when England was part of the Roman Empire, and primarily focused in London, but because of the thermal spa water at Bath, this became a place for the tired Roman leaders to come and relax. And it's an amazing what they engineered was just an amazing infrastructure. This is part of it. This is one of 3 large baths that existed at that time, and each one had a different temperature, so you could move from one to the next like a spa. And it was heated with underground furnaces that would heat the water. And at the time, this would all be covered. So it wasn't an open air. You were inside this warm, enclosed spa area. So they had a roof made of very hollow bricks that created an arch and created a roof, which has long collapsed, but the spa part is still there. And this is a multi-level complex. So if you're there, you're walking up and down stairs to see different parts, and they have a story telling you the purpose and who came. So it's quite an adventure, because you get to see how it actually looked back at that time. Now, as I was walking through the area, here is a reenactor. So he's playing the role of a Roman engineer, describing how they built the roof and how they heated the complex. So there I am with the actor, and maybe he is an engineering student. There's a university right there. So after taking enjoying the tour, Nancy and I had a little lunch as we prepared to get back on the bus to head to a different part of the British Isles. So our next spot was going to the town of Ludlow, and Ludlow is not in Wales, but it's just outside of Wales. And it's called, this region of England is called the Marsh area, because when William the Conqueror, when he came and defeated Harold, the King of England in 1066, he and his followers, the first thing they did is they started to build castles. And William the Conqueror, he built the Tower of London because he knew the locals are not happy that I'm here. Here, I'm a guy that came from France. I deserve to be king, but I wasn't really their choice. So he built a castle to defend himself and his family and his followers. But as he parceled out land around England to his followers, to the knights and to the leaders that came with him, he told them, build a castle to defend yourself and to defend our ownership of England. So out in this part of England, right near Wales, Wales was a Celtic region. They were constantly fighting the English, but so William the Conqueror said, you have this land, but you have to be ready to defend England against the Welsh people. So along here, along this border, his followers built castles every 20 or 30 miles so that they and their soldiers could defend England against the Welsh. So here we have the castle. Now, it became famous because we know the heir apparent to England, like Charles, until he was king, he was the Prince of Wales, was his title. So that is the traditional title of the heir apparent to England or to the United Kingdom. So back in 1473, the Prince of Wales was a 9 or 10-year-old boy, and his younger brother, they were here kind of learning, for their education and learning to be ready to become the future king. But they were held here, and that was part of their training. But their uncle, Richard, said, send the boys to London and to the Tower of London, and there they disappeared. So in all likelihood, they were killed by Richard because he wanted to be king rather than just the uncle to the king. He wanted to be the king himself, as indeed he did become. So this is part of the mystery of the Prince of Wales and his brother. So here we have, and we visited this town of Ludlow, and here Nancy and I were sitting having a little break. So when you're on a bus trip, oftentimes you're up at 6:30. They say have your luggage outside the door. Breakfast is at 7, and the bus departs at 10. Excuse me, at 8. So then, like 10 in the morning, the bus will, whatever they're doing, they're going to stop to have a coffee break. And so here we are at a coffee shop in Ludlow. But most of these towns, as you walk around, they have a shop, and the shop might be the British Cancer Society shop, resale shop, or it might be the homeless, housing the homeless resale shop. And I love to stop into these shops. I volunteer at a resale shop here for a nonprofit. But it's interesting to see what do people donate to in England to at a resale shop. But they also had wonderful Christmas cards and to buy. So we bought at several of these places. We stopped and bought a Christmas cards and other greeting cards. And to me, that's nice because you're buying something that's authentic. At most towns, you can go into a tourist shop and you can see, key rings and other little stuff, mostly made in China, but it's really not authentic. It's, it's not, it's something sold to the tourists. if you go into a resale shop or even go into a supermarket or a food store, you can see like the tea that the English and that the locals actually buy. I think that's more authentic than buying something made in China. So here we are. We're at this point. We left Ludlow and we're crossing into Wales. And Wales is a country with 3 million people. It's about the size of New Jersey, so it's not really that big. Rugby is as popular as soccer, and part of that is that they like rugby, but that's also part of the message that we're not, the English love soccer, and here in Wales we're Celtic. We're going to do our thing. We are different than the English, and they are one of the 7 Celtic nations, along with Scotland and Ireland, and even Brittany in France is a Celtic nation, is a Celtic region. So here we have Wales. Let me get here. Okay, so Wales, it became part of the British Empire in 1707, and then later it became part of Great Britain. We unified with Scotland in 1801. So they're part of the United Kingdom, but they really work to maintain their own language and their culture, despite heavy English dominance. There are only 3 million people. England is quite nearby. A lot of them work in England, but they work to maintain their own culture. So, in part of their culture was the coal mining center of England, of the British Isles. So as recently as 1950, coal mining was an enormous part of the employment for England, for Wales. And there are books, I read this years ago, but How Green Was My Valley. And this tells the story of a family in Wales, probably early 1900s. And they had this pristine little town. The coal mines were in the next town and the town beyond. Well, the coal company came to their town. And what was this beautiful valley, after 5 or 6 years, it had all the coal tailings. It was all the industrial waste from coal mining. People worked, but the beauty that they had really disappeared. So it was mixed, obviously mixed blessing. Now, more recently, public TV, PBS, they had a series for 2 years called The Indian Doctor. And it was a wonderful story because it talked about Wales in the 1950s. So the coal mines were still there, but they were struggling because they were no longer economically efficient. In this little town, they lost their doctor that had been there for 25 years. And the British, the UK health system, they hired this doctor that was new to the United Kingdom. He had come from India, so they assigned him to this little town. And his wife was horrified by that. She really wanted to be back in London or really back in India. And it's a heartwarming story because here is this stranger coming to this little town, not really with a great welcome, but he winds up doing wonderful work and eventually saves the town from his great medical knowledge and his humanity. So back with Margaret Thatcher, she said to the world and to the coal miners, we have to close the mines. It's cheaper to bring coal in from Pennsylvania than to mine it in the UK. So the world had moved on to oil and nuclear power and today solar power and wind power. But so she closed the mines, and this was very traumatic because their whole livelihood and their self-image was based on, the skills they had as a miner. So they probably, some I'm sure did cheer when she died, and many were just sad because of the terrible situation they were in. Today, many of the Welsh work in nearby English towns. So we this was the the town that we visited in Wales. And Llangollen is the name of the town. That's a pretty close approximation, but probably not totally accurate. So here we have a beautiful town. There's not mining right now. Here, this is a bigger town on a river. So they had some other industry. They had a railroad system. So here we are in this town in Wales. And but again, as time moves on, the rail system in Britain, which extended from almost every village had a railroad stop, and anyone could go probably 5 miles or less and have a railroad station near at hand. Well, so here we have the railroad station, but it had closed because when they reorganized the railroad systems, they said this is no longer viable. So the railroad still runs here, but it's only a little, they run, a group of volunteers run the railroad, a couple of the trains, 10 miles east and then back. It's like an excursion on the weekends. And all of this dates back to the 1960s when they looked at the railroad systems in the United Kingdom. And by this time, more and more people had cars by the 1960s. So the actual passenger usage on the railroads had really declined. So as they looked at how to reorganize, they wound up closing 2,000 stations and over 250 train services were abolished. And not surprisingly, this was this process that's 80 years ago. They're doing it again. They're looking at things. Even now, more and more people have automobiles, and so the rail systems, they're looking how do we move forward? What is the right railroad logic? But certainly is traumatic for this town that had been dependent on tourists coming, and all of a sudden the tourists either had to drive or switch to a different destination. Now, from here, we left Wales, and basically only one, part of one day in Wales, and we didn't even get to the major cities like Cardiff in Wales, but we did get a flavor for Wales. So our next stop, late that afternoon, we got to Liverpool, and here we have a picture of the modern, vibrant Liverpool, and this city is named after the liver bird, which actually doesn't even exist. It's a mythical bird, from what we were told. So, but somehow the town fathers selected this name. Now, Liverpool was not. London goes back over 2,000 years. Liverpool does not. Liverpool was just a small village on a river until trade in the 16 and 1700s. Trade with Africa and, most importantly, North America became an important part of their economy. So tobacco from America would come to Liverpool, and cotton would come, and sugar, and then the cotton would be milled in cotton fabric textile mills, and then sent around the world, including back to the U.S. So tea, this was inbound raw materials, and outbound would come industrial goods and consumer goods. So this was a city built on colonial expansion. So as we look even back to our Civil War, Liverpool was very pro-South because they needed the cotton that the southern states produced. And this was a very serious balancing act for Abraham Lincoln and the Union. So how to keep England and the United Kingdom neutral in during our Civil War, when their real preference was for the South. And fortunately, it was also interesting that the Confederate States, they said, we're not going to send cotton to Europe because that will force them to come to our side. And eventually the Union Navy blockaded the South, but even before the blockade, the South said, we're not going to send our cotton. fortunately for the North, the English were able to get cotton from Egypt. So there was they were able to have a second source for the cotton that they needed. So here we have a picture of Liverpool. This would have been typical 100 years ago. The trading ship by sail and eventually steamships. All the ships would come in, and it was an enormous opportunity to grow. So during the potato famine in Ireland, over 250,000 Irishmen and women came to Liverpool. There was lots of jobs, either on land or even on the ships. Once you had steamships, you needed lots of hard workers that could shovel the coal into to the furnaces. 200,000 Welsh came for opportunities as well. So Liverpool took so many people and what you see when we see in England particularly, you think, well, these are English, but in a place like Liverpool, there's a huge Irish population that continues to maintain kind of an Irish English identity. So one of the interesting things that our tour guide explained is back in colonial times, the English brought tobacco from the U.S. and eventually cotton, but the real wealth for England and the British Isles were in their colonies like Jamaica and the other Caribbean colonies. It was the sugar from those colonies that really was highly valuable. And but in 1833, the British had already decided that no longer allowing slave ships to come from Africa. So slavery was outlawed in terms of shipping slaves from Africa. However, slaves, the English owners of slaves in Jamaica, they continued to operate. They were still slave owners on their plantation. But one of the large owners of slaves, he came up with the idea. He said, why don't we free the slaves? And he convinced the Parliament to come up with 20 million pounds, which today's value is about $5 billion. And the idea was, we're going to compensate the owners of the slaves, and then the slaves can be free and be employees rather than owned by the plantation owners. Interestingly enough, the guy that came up with this idea, he was the biggest recipient of money because he owned a lot of slaves. And the slaves, they were no longer slaves, but then they became apprentices to learn how to manage their own farms. And then eventually they would be able to own their own farms. But to most slaves, one day they were a slave, the next day they were apprentice. Their life didn't change very much. They were still basically following the orders of the slave, of the plantation owner. And then eventually these plantations were no longer valuable. There were other ways of getting sugar, and the English and the British owners, they basically abandoned their plantations, as we see on the islands in the Caribbean. Now, so back in 1833, apparently with very little debate, the Parliament passed this as a law. They borrowed the money, and that loan was not paid off until 2014, which, so over almost 200 years before that was a 200-year loan. So here we have Liverpool at the end of World War II, the celebrations at the end of the end of the war, and here we have the infrastructure, the warehouses that existed there. So by 1900 and then rolling into the 1980s, this was part of the warehouse and shipping infrastructure, so that a large ship could dock on either any one of these four sides of these buildings and offload their cargo they could put it directly on a train going somewhere, or they could sit in these warehouses for later distribution. So this was the logic of warehousing and shipping up until the 1980s. But by the 1980s, there was a whole new logic with container ships. So now the container ships and the container port moved 10 or 15 miles away, and you had these basically empty warehouses. And the decision was what to do with it. One group said, let's tear it down. And another group said, maybe we could repurpose them for a different purpose. And they heard about Boston that had the same logic with these large warehouses, and Boston repurposed them for offices and residences. So that eventually was the decision reached for Liverpool. And here we have it today, these buildings that were, huge buildings that were built. These buildings could last 200 or 300 years. They were built so well, but now they're used for offices and residences. And if you're particularly wealthy to afford one of these fancy sailboats, you could have your sailboat right outside your residence. Now, all of this was really critical to turn around Liverpool. That in the 1980s and 1990s, it was virtually a dying city. The employment was way down. The automation of the shipping meant that employment in the cargo shipping was greatly reduced. So Liverpool was really on hard time. But over the last 20 years, it's really revived. It's become a popular place for young people to live and technology workers. And these homes here were part of what they call the council homes for people on public assistance. But now these are popular private homes now for the middle class. So Liverpool is coming back, and very, very nicely. Now we did visit there's two huge churches in Liverpool. This is the Church of England church, and there's a huge Catholic cathedral as well. But we visited this church. This is the Church of England church, and it's an enormous building. And our tour guide said it costs them about $5,000 a day to keep this building up and running and maintain it. And the Church of England, they don't have, it's funded by the government, but the government is stretched, so they can't do all the things that they would like to do. So at this church over in the corner, they have a restaurant. So a religious service might be taking place, and you'll hear the plates tinkling over on the restaurant as people are dishing up soup and sandwiches. And they also rent the building out. BMW, when they were announcing a new car, they announced it here with the inviting people and bringing the cars into the building. So they're trying to be creative at keeping these churches up and running. Now, we can't leave Liverpool without talking about the Beatles. So here we have the Beatles, 1963, and Liverpool was their home, and they were playing music and establishing a reputation. And our tour guide explained that they were doing okay, but they were a local band. But what really changed their life was a gig they had in Hamburg in Germany. And there was a guy in Germany opening up a nightclub. So he called, he wanted to have some British music. And so the organizer from Liverpool said, well, the first and second band that you want, they're booked up, they're not available. But down the list were the Beatles, these four guys. And so the guy in Hamburg said, okay, we'll give them a chance. So they went over to Hamburg, and they played music every night for 6 or 7 hours every day. And they say they did not repeat a song once in that 7 hours. They played, they didn't have a lot of their own music yet, but they were playing the music of the time. And it really developed their skills as musicians, so that when they came back to Liverpool, they had moved up significantly in their skill set. Now here is the venue that they really got established at, and it's called the Cavern, and it's a venue in Liverpool, and many other performers performed here. You can see their Queen, you know, their whole list, this whole wall listed with performers that really performed here and in many ways got their start and their visibility up. And here is it's a cavern. It's actually the venue for music is actually in the lower level of a warehouse. And here we see the picture on the left is there's a band performing at the far end. So it's a low ceiling, and there's side rooms here so people can hear. But back in the 60s and 70s, this warehouse had been a cabbage warehouse, and it was not air conditioned. And so music started at 11 o'clock in the morning and played late into the night. But if you came here during your lunch break, when you went back to the office, you were a little sweaty and you smelled of cabbage. So people could say, I know where you were for your lunch break. So you brought evidence back with you. So now Paul McCartney, he graduated from the Liverpool Institute High School for Boys. So what we'd consider our high school. And by the mid 1990s, the building was in a state of disrepair. They were going to close it. And so he stepped in with his personal wealth and get other contributors to convert this building into the Liverpool Institute for Performing Arts. And it opened in 1996. Paul, he comes here not for every graduation, but when he can, to be part of the graduation ceremony. So there he is at one of the graduation. Now, from Liverpool, we spent the night in Liverpool, and on a bus trip like this, occasionally you spend 2 nights at the same spot, but more often you spend just 1 night. So, but it's not, for us, it wasn't a real inconvenience. You know, you have your luggage, they take it off the bus, they bring it to your room. In the morning, you leave your luggage outside the door and they take it to the bus. So, so you're up early, but it's still, if you have a little flexibility, it's still a good deal. And you get to see a lot. So the next part of our trip, we moved to the Lake District. And this is a district north of Liverpool. And it was the adopted home of Beatrice Potter. Well, first of all, here is a tea house in the town. And so here we stopped, as you did in the morning, for a little break. Here's so this is 10 or 10:30 in the morning. We already had a nice breakfast at 7 a.m. But here we have a scone and some soup and tea, and the scones are huge. So you could share a scone if you really want to be extravagant. You can have soup and a scone along with your tea. But this was a short stop. But here's a picture of the same tea house around 1900, and so people were there. This could have been morning or afternoon, just enjoying nice weather. People dressed pretty formally. Look at people have a hat. Men and women, they're decked out, and these would typically be. This could well be upper middle class people. The rich, they'd be doing this in their mansions or in their their large estates. But upper middle class people, this would be a typical thing for them to do. But this was the home of Wadsworth, and he was known for lyrical ballads, as you can see on this one, very flowery. I'm lonely floating on a cloud. So he wrote these wonderful poems, and this was his home, and we visited the church and the cemetery where he was buried. And here we have Beatrice, and Beatrice was raised, she was a child of an upper middle class family. She had her own governess for teachers, so she wasn't in public or private schools. She kind of lived a kind of a quiet life as a child, but she adopted, the stories and made up stories of animals, and she eventually started writing books like the Tales of Peter Rabbit, and eventually wrote over 25 books. And she was very astute because at this time, and this is the early 1900s, most authors they sold their book to the publisher, and the publisher had all the royalties for that book, so they got a decent amount of money. But if it was a huge hit, the publisher received all that extra profit. Where Beatrice said, "No, I'll publish it myself. I'll pay you to print it," but she kept the royalties and the rights to her book. So she was extremely wealthy as that result. She bought large chunks of property in the Lake District, and she eventually donated that to the British government to be national parks. So she was very generous in sharing her wealth and in the land that she had purchased. So we're moving now up further north to Scotland. We're doing kind of the whole circle of the British Isles. So here we are up in Scotland. And Scotland, this was how Scotland was always kind of the unknown territory, or the dangerous territory. So that when the Romans were here, they conquered basically all of England except Wales and Scotland. Those were kind of beyond. They tried to conquer these places, but the warriors from Scotland, it just wasn't worth continuing to fight. And the Romans said, "Well, what's up there that we really want?" So it was kind of a dual decision. Let's separate ourselves from them. So the Emperor Hadrian, he eventually built a large wall separating it, going 73 miles from the Atlantic Ocean on the west to the English Channel on the east. And here's what the wall looks like today. So it's still here, and we picture this as a wall. And so when you see this wall, you'd say, well, this would not stop anybody. If there were 1,000 Scots coming over, they could easily climb over this wall. Well, it was much more than a wall. So first of all, the wall was 12 and 15 feet tall, such that soldiers could walk on the top of the wall, and then every 5 miles there'd be a guard post where 50 soldiers could be on the lookout, and then every 20 miles there would be a much bigger fort where you could have 600 soldiers ready on call to go to defend the wall. So this was much more than just a simple wall. You could almost think of it as the Great Wall of China, a smaller version of the Great Wall of China. And these were Roman soldiers, but over time, the Roman soldiers were actually British men that that had volunteered to become a Roman soldier. So their general and the senior officers may have come from Rome, but many of the soldiers were actually local guys. So all of this existed, but then in the 400s, the Rome they said, bring the soldiers back. We need to defend Rome. So eventually, the Roman presence from a military point of view dissipated, and it was up to the locals to try to defend themselves from eventually the Germans coming over as Anglo-Saxons. So here's the wall today. Now, when we talk about Scotland, even to this day, the Romans gave up conquering it, but the English still have and the Scots, they still have 100 years, not all fighting, but there's still cultural bitterness and cultural disconnects. So if you watch the TV show Outlanders, it tells the story of the Scottish, the Scottish clans fighting what they portray as the very evil British. So, but these were cultures that had two different whole views of life. The Scottish clans, they owned their territory and they selected who their leader would be. The English said, well, the king owns everything. We do everything at his pleasure. And if the king doesn't want you to be the ruler, he can take all your land. So these were diametrically opposed views of government. And I mean, so there were bound to be clashes. So back in 1603, King James, who he was the king of Scotland, and because when Queen Elizabeth died, the English said, well, he became the king of England as well, because he was the distant relative of Queen Elizabeth I. So here he is, king of Scotland, king of England. So in a way they're united, but Parliament was very concerned about him because in Scotland he ruled. He was the monarch that had total rule. Where in England, Parliament said the king is the king, but we are co-rulers with the king. So that was a difference that they had to contend with. But there were even religious differences. So James I, he gave us the King James Bible, which is that wonderful document. But in Scotland, the Christian church was largely Calvinistic, where in England, the Church of England at that time was pretty much Roman Catholic, but without a pope. So I mean, even their religious views and all of that, was a disconnect between the two peoples. Now, 100 years later, they created the Act of Union that Parliament proposed, and the Scottish went along with it. So Scotland became not just having a shared king, but they were formally part of one government with one united Parliament. And so this became the United British. And you can see from the flag up on the blue one with the cross, that was a Scottish flag. The English had the St. George cross. So the new British flag combined both of the, combined both elements of the other group. So this was a wish of England to have basically direct control of Scotland. And they achieved it through economic incentives, patronage, and even bribery, because the Scottish Parliament had to vote for this. And so bribery was even part of the deal to get the Scottish Parliament to go along. So here we have, when we arrived in Scotland, the first place our bus arrived in was a place called Greta Green, and it was just over the border from England. And this was it's kind of it's a totally tourist stop. But what made this an interesting place for tourism is this is where the English couples could come to be married. Because in England, you had to be 21 to marry unless you had your parents' approval. Where if you were 19 years old as a couple, you could go over to Scotland and be married immediately, because there you could be 18 and marry even without your parents' approval. So this became kind of the Las Vegas of its time for couples to get married. And so they have all these shops, and this was a blacksmith shop. So the blacksmith, he was the guy that started marrying people. So it's a tourist stop. And here we are. Here's Nancy and I at part of their sculpture of the couple getting married. So you can have coffee here and tea and wander around and buy souvenirs. It's a convenience stop again for the bus. So later that same day, we arrived in Edinburgh. In Edinburgh is this magical spot. It's on it has this huge granite hill, and here we have the Edinburgh Castle, and on top of this hill. So this is a castle, but it's not a castle like Buckingham Palace. It's a castle with armament and cannons for the English to control the local population. And it's a enormous. Here's one of the main thoroughfares, what they call the Royal Mile. The castle is at the top end, and this is all, this is where the tourists come that are visiting Edinburgh. And every August they have what they call the military tattoo, and you see here, there's could be 20,000 people here watching the performances that initially were military. Even 20 years ago, they were largely military bands. There's Edinburgh Castle at the far end in blue. But today, it's the 25 days that it runs. It's much less military and a lot more other performers. So Taylor Swift has not performed here, but many other performers come, and many other dancers and performers would come as well. So here we are. We had a Scottish dinner and entertainment, and we spent 2 nights in Edinburgh. So here, one of the things that Edinburgh is known for is that Royal Mile. People would live there in the Middle Ages and more recently, but they really needed much more housing. So beginning in 1770, they started building, using kind of urban planning to devise a new city environment. And they built many of these apartments in 1770, and then they built another whole series in 1850. And the beauty is every home is within a block of a nice little park. So here we have a major church in the middle, but all these homes they have a park nearby. And our driver could explain, our tour guide could explain, depending on the size of the building, whether it was part of the first batch or the second batch. And these are very desirable places to live. And here is one of the parks. And at the time, and I think even today, the homeowners had a key to get into the park. So it was basically a park just for the homeowners or the friends of the homeowners. It wasn't a park open to the general population. So the local residents, they had a key to their local park. That's my understanding. So another interesting fellow that was very important for Scottish history is Walter Scott. So beginning in the around 1800, he was writing wonderful stories about Scotland and the military tales of battles and bravery. And what was so important about that is it really awakened this part of the United Kingdom to the rest of England. So they really became interested in Scotland because these were hugely popular books. So people said, let's go up and visit Scotland. So Scotland became a destination point for the middle class in England. And trains certainly made that even more practical because people could get up there in a reasonable amount of time and enjoy the Highlands and enjoy Edinburgh. Now, our tour guide explained that her mother, in the 1940s, this was required reading of every high school kid in England. Well, that's not so true anymore. So, nobody, they sell the books at these gift shops, but very few people are reading Walter Scott anymore. But he was very important at the time. And he was quite wealthy because of all the books. He built this home and castle about 15, 20 miles south of Edinburgh, and at large gardens. And he collected memorabilia from Scotland, some of it real, some of it fake. But as you walked in the hallway, he could show you the whole history of Scotland from the memorabilia on the walls. And here's part of the garden. There's Nancy, part of the garden. And so after Edinburgh, we moved south to York, which is a beautiful city, and it was part of the industrial heartland for England. And so here we see this picture from the middle 1800s, where steel mills and the technology for steel and making rails, our early trains, when in the 1850s, and we think of the Civil War, we were bringing steel rails from England because we could make iron rails here, but the steel rails were much more effective for trains, and we eventually figured out how to make them ourselves. But initially, the technology leadership was clearly in York. So here, York, wonderful place to visit. We were there only one afternoon and one evening, so I really look forward to going back. So they have winding streets and shops, cathedrals, a beautiful British Rail Museum. It was a film site for many of the Harry Potter movies. So here's a Harry Potter store, and Nancy could put her broom on the rack as you go shopping. Here's the York Cathedral, York Minster. In Yorkshire, this region of England, this is what's featured in the PBS show All Creatures Great and Small. So this was the beautiful countryside that you see in the TV series. So many of these towns, there's wonderful pubs, and some of the pubs they even have rooms to rent, so that you could stay in a pub if you were traveling independently. And most of what we did with this tour bus, people could do a large part of this just on your own, taking the trains, to Liverpool, up to Edinburgh. So there's public transportation. You don't have to rely on a tour bus group to take you around. After we left York, we were heading into the heartland of center. Sheffield was another steel industrial town. But wonderful steel during the Industrial Revolution. But today, there's very little steel made in England anymore. There's no customers. They don't make many cars. The industrial products that they would ship around the world, they're made elsewhere, including the US and China. So most of the steel mills have closed, but it's still playing an important role in education and technology. So we were ending up our trip in visiting Shakespeare's home in Stafford on Avon, on the Avon River. And so William Shakespeare lived in the late 1500s. Here's the town, and today it's living off the importance of William Shakespeare. So many people come, and they have other things going on, but the tourism is based on visiting the home of William Shakespeare. And here's the Shakespeare Center. So we took a tour, and we spent an hour and a half here visiting his home and the museum, telling the story of his life and works. And this was so we'll show Shakespeare's original home in a minute, but here is the home that William built later in life. He was a successful playwright and an actor, so he built a very nice home, and he willed it to his daughter, and it stayed in the family for a while, but it was eventually sold to non-family members, and eventually a priest lived here of the Church of England, and Casrell, and he was so annoyed with all the people coming to visit that he decided to knock the building down. And it was probably other reasons too, but he in today's world would say, well, let's convert this into a tourist attraction. So here we have, this is the home that William was born into, and his father was a glove merchant and a respected citizen of this town. So they're not sure if the father owned the whole building or if it was the portion on the right. Back in the 1600s, people didn't necessarily have huge homes. So this may have been home for several families, but today it's all considered part of the Shakespeare tourism effort. And one interesting part, the American, I think it was Barnum and Bailey, was going to buy this building and move it to America. And it so outraged the British population. They said, well, we need to stop that, and we need to buy it and create the Shakespeare Center. So it was the American effort to buy this building and move it to the US that prompted, and that is somewhat typical of Europe. There are many buildings that are of huge historical importance that were still owned by individuals. And in some places, some of the castles in France and some of the castles in England, they're still owned by families, trying, in some cases, struggling to keep them open and maybe bring in tourism. So I wanted to wrap up this lecture just looking a little broadly at history. So there is, I want to kind of step back into the 1930s when we had the Great Depression was taking place. We had Adolf Hitler rising in Germany. We had fascism in Italy. So we had Winston Churchill saying, we need to prepare, we need to defend Western values. And then we had Neville Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister of England. So Hitler saying we need to step up to Hitler. He also said we have to preserve the empire at any cost, never give up India. And in India, India was ripe for them. The Indians wanted to form their own democracy. They wanted to separate themselves from the empire. That was totally, Winston Churchill was totally against that. He said, we need to preserve India at all costs. So here we have 1938, Neville Chamberlain, the rise of Adolf Hitler. He had already swallowed up countries and Austria for one, and parts of the Czech Republic. And so war was imminent in 1938, and they were even handing out gas masks in England, preparing for a war that could be immediately. And here's Neville Chamberlain trying to wrestle with this. And he realized that England at this time, their manufacturing was obsolete, their agriculture was totally obsolete, their colonies were going or gone. And he realized we're broke, we can't afford a war. So if we go to war, we're going to lose all our colonies because we're going to be even more bankrupt than we are today. If we go to war and win, we're still bankrupt. We're still going to lose all the colonies. So I think, Neville, in this dilemma, he said, maybe there's a chance that this time Adolf Hitler will live up to his promises. So he went off to Munich, and he came back and saying, we have peace at our time. But, Hitler signed this pledge. If we give him the rest of Czech Republic, if we turn our back on the Czechs, Hitler will hopefully honor his pledge this time. Well, we know it did not turn out that way. So, but it was not to be. And Britain did stand up and fought off the Nazis until Russia came into the war, and then eventually the U.S. entered the war. But England and the United Kingdom, they and their colonies were on their own and did a magnificent job. But as Chamberlain had feared, they did lose everything, all the pretense of world power. So England and the United Kingdom, they basically became a junior partner to the United States. And today, it's a new reality. They're world-class in entertainment and tourism. They have great universities with science and research. They're big on financial services, but as they have moral authority. But in terms of their military, they're really a very, very small shadow of what the United States represents. So in many ways, they've gone back to where they started as that small village that we talked about earlier. I did want to say a few words about BritX. England and the United Kingdom broke off from the European Union for the united organization, and the promise and the hope of that is that they would control their borders, and to some extent they have done that. a little better than before. Now this is my scorecard, not you may disagree, and professors in England might disagree. But another hope of the BritX was the money from the national health. There was talk that that England was giving $36 billion a month to Europe, and all that money could be used for the national health system. Well, as it turned out, there's been little extra money for the national health system. So they have this magnificent vision for the health system, but the actual performance has been very been degraded, not improved. Less unemployment. So again, there's no significant improvement on the employment side. Less regulation was a goal. Again, they still have to follow rules if they're going to ship their products to Europe. They still have to follow all the standards to send their products over there, even though they pay a tariff now. So the regulation did not go away, and the greater prosperity. My general view is there's less prosperity in the United Kingdom now because of the break off with the BritX than might have occurred if they were still part of the European Union. So the promise and what actually has resulted, there's in my view, a significant disconnect. So back to the beginning, maybe they still are the Shire people now, as they not as a world power anymore, but as people in entertainment that look after each other and people in healthcare. So that they're maybe they are moving back to the smaller size and the smaller role in the world, but still proud and still recognizing the accomplishments that they brought to the world, and certainly that they brought to our nation, which is so much built on the English and what our forefathers looked to for England. So that's it. Just a couple notes, final notes. If you're going to England now, there's a new electronic travel authorization process. It's called ETA, and for the rest of Europe, it's ETIA. So this is already in place for the UK. You could look it up online, and they basically ask you a bunch of questions, and you pay $20, and it's good for 2 or 3 years to enter the United Kingdom. Okay, so let's until next time. That's the story for today. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments. Pamela, do you want to read off any questions that have come in?
Okay, well, let's see. We did have one question about the recording, and we will have it up on YouTube for 2 weeks. I don't know exactly when it goes up because it's another department that handles that, but as soon as he does get it on YouTube, I'll send out a link. So, okay. What tour company did you use?
We use Globus for that tour company, but and we've used also Trafalgar. We've had good luck with all the different tour companies. So I don't think some are a little more expensive or less expensive than the others, but everyone we've been on has done a very nice job.
Okay, this was great. Thanks so much. Very interesting. This was so fascinating. Thank you so much. Thank you. It was very good and interesting. I learned a lot. This was great. So we have lots of thank yous. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Did you see a lot of London while you were there?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. So Nancy and I, we got to London. We got to London 2 days before the tour began, and afterwards we spent 4 days on our own in London. So in London, you don't need a tour company to take you around London. You could hire tour guides for an afternoon if you want, but London, it's so easy to do on your own. The tour began basically when we were leaving London to head to Stonehenge, and when it returned to London, it was the end of the bus trip. So, but London, if you are on a tour, it is nice to spend a couple extra days or more in London because there's so much to see.
Okay. Yeah, no other questions. Okay. Oh, did you get to try a lot of food?
Oh, absolutely. There's, it's, well, first of all, we had lots of food as we moved around the country. And in London itself, there's such a wealth of food. When you think of all the colonies, from Chinese, from Hong Kong, Pakistan, India, there's food from around the world. And London is a very cosmopolitan uh, city. And I think most, the actual traditional white English people, that might represent, 40 or 50% of London. But, the whole world is there and enjoying the culture of London. So there's so many black and brown and yellow people. It's really the color of the rainbow that is there.
Okay, wow, that sounds awesome. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I do want to remind you about Jean's next program on June 5th, Barcelona, Jewel of the Mediterranean. Let's see. Oh, here's one more. Did you go to Melrose Abbey?
No, we did not. So that would have been interesting. And Downton Abbey from the TV show, you can visit those places, but we did not visit. And we did visit Westminster Abbey in London, as well as St. Paul's Cathedral in London. So those were the big religious sites that we were at.
Okay. Did you go to the castle where Charles became the Prince of Wales?
No. So I'm not sure the castle. I don't think we did. I'm not sure what castle that was. We did go to in the past, we were at the building where Harry and his wife and children lived. And because that was the home of Queen Victoria before she moved to Buckingham Fountain. So we were walking to the tourist part, and we were actually going to the wrong spot. So we were going where Harry and Kate and the children lived. And the police came out and said, no, you can't come here. You have to go around to the front. That's the entrance to visit the residence from Queen Victoria.
Okay. Did you take a Beatles tour, and did you get to see Penny Lane?
No, we did not. We did not take, but that's one of many specialized tours that you can take in London. And the beauty of the libraries, the libraries have so many wonderful books. I follow Rick Steves' travel guides, but your library has so many guides for different parts of Europe. They can give you a great deal of advice. And the internet allows you to pick and choose if you are interested in opera and kayaking, there will be a tour that you could find on the internet that will give you kayaking between opera sites. I mean, it's literally, 20 years ago, people had to take vanilla tours. Now there's so many specialized tours. You could say biking and churches, and there will be a tour that gives you exactly what you're looking at.
Okay. Could a side trip to the Isle of Skye be easily arranged or hard to do?
I'm not sure, but if you Google that, particularly with the AI options, it will give you can ask for detailed advice on that topic, including what time of day to go. You will get very detailed information on that on the internet.
Okay, I'm going to combine the next two questions. Did you ride the Eye, and what's next on your visit list?
Okay, so we were very near the Eye, our resident. We did not ride. It's a wonderful experience, but I think it was, for two of us to go, I think it would be $80. So we would much rather spend our money doing other things. So we did not ride the Eye, and our next European tour we're going to Paris in October.
Oh, I can't wait for that one.
That's the next one. That's our next trip.
Okay, I think we've had plenty of questions for tonight. We will see you on June 5th, and I can't wait to hear about Paris. Sounds,
Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, thank you
Good night,
again.
everyone.
Everyone
Thank you, Jean.
keep traveling.
Thank
Take-
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.